yeah, I hate his name.
You call him Maximus. Go the gladiator route. That'd be
real dumb. That'd be real dumb.
Welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. I'm Tyler Hunt, and I'm here with my co-host, as always, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, man?
It's going. I'm kind of tired. We just got a new dog, which is always just the best, but also the sleep schedule has not been great because he's still kind of getting used to his surroundings, and so it's been a little crazy, but good crazy, because obviously it's really, really fun having a new dog. I love animals, so it's really cool. This is the last one. Three's my max, but I really wanted to get a bigger dog because I have two smaller dogs.
Yeah.
So I always grew up with bigger dogs, so having two small dogs has been definitely a transition for me. It's weird because, like, I love my little dogs, but
you need to overcompensate, right?
Well, yeah, because I have a tiny penis. But no, I don't know what that has to do with dogs. But they're different in a way, like good different. But there's definitely something about having a big dog that's like. We were driving to PetSmart the other day, and I rolled down the window, and he stuck his head out like a normal dog would.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do that with my little guys; they would probably fall out of the window. They're crazy, so they probably actually would just jump out. And so I've been walking them more, and he's much more of like the typical dog. Like when I walk my little dogs, they're just crazy.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting, but a lot of fun at the same time.
Yeah, I remember whenever I adopted my dog Ivy, like the first 2 weeks, I just stressed myself out over it. Like I was so worried about her, so nervous leaving her. And of course, it's introducing a new creature to your home is big. So yeah, I remember being sleep deprived and all of that good stuff. So I can appreciate what you're going through.
Yeah, and I feel bad because it's like I'm giving the new dog a lot of attention because he needs to kind of get used to everything, and I feel like I'm like loving the other ones less. I mean, Caesar's fine with it because he was never really my dog to begin with. He definitely attached himself to my wife, and it's kind of her dog. But that's been a problem because he's super, super protective of her.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's been led to some awkward situations with the new guy. But I mean, it's only been a few days, and so they'll kind of get into the groove of things and can get into a routine. So I'm not worried about it. He's definitely fun. He's got a lot of energy, which I appreciate, because if I wanted a chill dog, I would just get a cat. So I like the fact that, hey, he's got a lot of energy, and we've been going on some walks around the neighborhood, which is always good. I've been playing some more Pokemon Go while we're on our walks, so that's been fun. Yeah, I've been really, really excited. The only bummer is I hate his name. I hate it, but he's 3. We adopted an older one, so I mean, if anything like a year or less, then we probably would have changed it. But 3, that's way too much to change it.
Yeah, but when did they find him, or was he like?
I'm not sure. They didn't really give me his origin story.
Because I guess you were telling me off recording that he had been there for a while, so maybe that would have been an issue. But with my dog, her fucking name was Mona.
Oh, no way.
But they found her like on the side of the road of Mount Vernon, which is close to Evansville where we're recording this. And she had only been at the shelter for like a week. And it's like, well, they gave her a shitty name and it wasn't her real name. So
yeah,
we just renamed her.
I lucked out with Rambo. Like, that's a pretty cool dog name.
Well, you got Rambo and you got Caesar.
Yeah,
and
his name was Stewie. No fucking way. I forget. There was 2 of them. They were brothers, and they both had weird, like, Stewie, and like it was very, very similar. It started with an S, and it was very, very similar. And I was like, no.
After a while, they just stopped trying. They're like, we got too many fucking dogs.
And there goes my fire alarm. We have to acknowledge that because I can't edit it out. But yeah, my wife's making lunch right now, so I apologize for that.
No big deal.
But yeah, it was a little too late to change his name. But I mean, we were talking about this via text message. I could always just call him Mad Max or something like that kind of go with the movie theme of the dog naming. But yeah, I hate his name.
You call him Maximus and go the gladiator route. That'd be real dumb. That'd be real dumb. All right. So if this is your first episode, we start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We're pretty busy guys, and so we don't get to have as many nerdy conversations as we normally do. So that's why we kind of just like checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week? I wanted to start this podcast off just throwing a little shade.
Okay.
I want to talk about the best movie I saw this weekend. Yeah.
I know what movie you're going to talk about, and I'm totally fine with you saying that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get in. I mean, I'm just throwing shade because obviously we're reviewing War for the Planet of the Apes this episode, and I know that's Pat's big movie. So I was, again, just throwing a little shade. But in all seriousness, this was a fantastic movie that I'm getting ready to talk about, and that's The Big Sick. So this movie had piqued my interest for quite a while. I had seen the trailer for it in front of something a few months ago and kind of forgot about it, but then I've started seeing promotional stuff for it, and I listened to an episode of Nerdist where he had Kumail Nanjiani, who of course is from Silicon Valley, and his wife Emily V. Gordon, who I believe is a writer at this point. And they were very charming on it, talking about the movie and talking about the true story that inspired this movie. And I got really interested in it, and I was super psyched to see that Evansville got it, because we usually take a couple months to get these into our theaters here in Southern Indiana. So there are a lot of talent involved with this movie just from those two. Kumail's a really great comedic actor, and he's really good at writing. And then Emily, of course, I'm not as familiar with her work, but she can carry herself very well, and apparently she's written quite a bit. So it was getting amazing reviews. I was very excited, needless to say. I had lofty expectations, and I'm excited to say they weren't only met, but they were exceeded with this movie. If you don't know what The Big Sick is about, it starts out kind of as a romantic comedy. It follows stand-up comedian Kumail as he deals with the heckling of his parents to take part in an arranged marriage and follow Pakistani and Muslim traditions. At the same time, he's kind of met this student named Emily, and the two kind of fall for each other. Emily ends up being hospitalized and put into a medically induced coma, and through that, we continue to follow Kumail as he deals with that. He meets her parents through this, and then also continuing to deal with the issues going on with his parents who want him to follow these traditions that his family partakes in. So Emily's parents are played by Ray Romano and Holly Hunter, who are fantastic in this movie. This is a pretty basic description of the movie because I don't want to give a lot away, but there are a lot of layers to it, and there are a lot of character arcs within this movie. And I definitely purposefully left some stuff out so that you can kind of experience as I did, some surprises that kind of happened along the way. I thought everything about this movie shined. The performances were great. The story was absolutely fantastic. It might help that it's based pretty closely on the true story of Kumail and Emily and what happened as they were dating and meeting each other. But the comedic timing in this movie that I'm sure that they are very much responsible for was awesome. Obviously, a movie like this carries a lot of weight because it's dealing with some very dramatic things, some very big family issues. And of course, somebody's hospitalized in a medically induced coma, but they do a really good job throughout the film of interjecting comedy and never making you feel uncomfortable. It's a really charming story with a lot of themes about love and being yourself and making your own happiness. And I couldn't recommend it more. It is probably top 3 movies I've seen this year. I really, really enjoyed it.
So spoiler alert for our review later. This is my favorite movie so far of the year.
Awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I did not enjoy that you swooped in at the 11th hour and called dibs on this as I'm sitting in the theater.
So I went and saw a movie Friday night when I got back into town from work, and I went and saw a movie yesterday, and I prioritized this before War for the Planet of the Apes. I saw this Friday night at like 10 o'clock, and then I saw War for the Planet of the Apes yesterday because I was more excited for The Big Sick. which, not taking anything away from War for the Planet of the Apes, I just thought that it looked really charming, and I'm glad I did that because I really loved it, and I'm glad to hear you loved it too. I'm sure that the stand-up stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well. But it wasn't just that. Like, I love those types of movies. I love them hanging out in the green room because I've had similar conversations like that. I wouldn't want to say green room because I'm not quite there yet, but kind of backstage sort of areas. And so I definitely related to that. Like you said, it starts off as a romantic comedy, pretty predictable type of romantic comedy. It definitely goes through those bullet points, I guess, of a romantic comedy, but pretty quickly. Like that first act, it just kind of squeezes that whole thing in there, and then you have her getting sick, and it just takes a completely different turn, but it still has some humor in it too. So I definitely appreciated that. Like a lot, it's really, really funny in that first act, and then the second act, not so much, but it does kind of it's definitely more awkward.
Yeah.
But it actually has one of the funniest jokes I think I've seen in a long time. That 9/11 joke is probably one of my favorites in movies. Like, that was really, really funny, and that's in that second act, and it's super awkward, but it's such a fantastic joke that I really appreciated that quite a lot. And then it gets funny towards the third act as well. But when she's sick, it definitely is more serious for sure, but it definitely has that comedic aspect to it as well. It's really, really just a fantastic movie. It's funny as I expected, like I said, but it has so much more. It has a lot of heart, has a ton of different layers. The character development is really great, which makes sense because it's autobiographical, so that would make sense. I love that she had a cameo in it.
Yeah, at the end.
So I thought that was pretty cool. I have been a fan of hers for a while, actually. I follow her on Twitter. She had been on, I don't know if it was an episode of Nerdist or maybe it was Pete Holmes' his podcast, You Made It Weird, where she was just charming as fuck. Like, it was way before I had heard anything about this movie. I think I actually want to say that she had like teased that they were writing something together, but she was really, really vague about it. And so I was really interested in that and what ended up being this movie. So yeah, I've been a fan of both of them for quite a while now, so I'm happy to report that I really, really like this movie. I feel like if War for the Planet of the Apes doesn't knock this movie off its top spot, which it didn't, I don't see that there's going to be a movie that will.
Yeah, it was really great, man. Like I said, I had pretty high expectations, and it not only met it, it exceeded it. So you all should rush out and see this movie because Pat and I both obviously have big things to say about it. So that being said, what are you into?
Well, like I said, you swooped in while I was sitting in the theater. That movie, The Big Sick, is what I was planning on being into. But I kind of had to watch something after that, after seeing the movie last night. And I was just kind of scrolling through Netflix, kind of trying to find something interesting to talk about. And I found a movie that I had never heard of. It's a little crowd-funded horror movie called The Void.
Okay.
Which was released, I think, a couple of months ago. It was directed by two different directors, Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. And it's about this officer after finding a mysterious man on the side of the road. Officer Daniel Carter is trapped inside a hospital fighting a group of hooded figures and supernatural forces. Didn't really know what to expect. Like I said, I didn't know anything about this movie going in. It had a good rating on Netflix, which you never really know because there's a lot of stupid people that rate stuff on Netflix. So it's kind of like following IMDb rating. Like that's hit or miss for me. But not knowing or really having any expectations going into this movie, I think plays to the movie's favor. And so I'm going to be kind of vague when I talk about this movie because I think the less you know about it, the better. It has clear influences from like old campy horror, like 80s horror and sci-fi. It obviously has some really clear like H.P. Lovecraft influences as well. The plot is fucking bonkers. Like it really gets quite crazy quite quickly. It's only about an hour and a half, so it doesn't take very long. That third act is just basically a 30-minute fever dream. Like, it gets really crazy really quickly. That being said, the directors put so much care into the atmosphere and the production design. Just, it was surprisingly good for a crowd-funded horror film. The care that they put into it. So yeah, the plot was left a little bit to be desired, but everything else was just so fantastic that it kind of rose above the material to a certain expectation, I guess. Even though I didn't really love it, I just appreciated the fact that the filmmakers tried to make something a little bit different. It's definitely not a horror movie that you've seen before. I think that they could have easily just done the tropey horror movie and been okay with it, but they tried something completely different. I'd never really seen something that was just this completely out there. Like, the plot gets really crazy really quickly. I think that more people should check this movie out because it's completely different, especially if you like that campy horror sci-fi movie. Like I said, it's only an hour and a half, so it's not a huge time investment. So definitely check it out. If you have Netflix, check out The Void, because I enjoyed it even though I wasn't expecting a whole lot from it.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check this out. It sounds interesting. I just don't know if I want to do it now, or, it's never too early to start thinking about Shocktober. So
for sure,
maybe save it for then. But it sounds interesting, man.
For sure. It's interesting is, I think, an understatement for this movie. Like I said, it gets really, really crazy.
Awesome. You ready for comics?
For sure. What'd you read this week?
I read Shirtless Bear Fighter #1.
Okay.
Which is kind of ironic because I had planned on picking this up when I saw, the title alone sold me on this book. So I had high hopes for this comic just based on the title. The premise seemed hilarious, but then you had posted a tweet and the official Twitter for this book liked it.
I don't even know what it was.
Yeah.
I remember it.
It's weird. It was a weird coincidence.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. I had actually never even heard of this book. And then they liked it. And I was like, oh, and I clicked on it. And I was like, yeah, that kind of sounds interesting. And then you had mentioned that you were going to read it. So I was like, oh, I'll see what he thinks about it before I pick it up.
Yeah, so you could say that we're pretty tight with the people who created this book. Unfortunately, it is garbage.
Oh, really?
And I feel bad because they obviously know we exist in some form or another, because they could have just liked our tweet out or being random. So, but I hope they're not listening, but they made a really shitty book. I was hoping. So
you got to keep it real, man.
I know. I'm not going to fluff them just because they liked a tweet. So the comedy for this book, the best way that I can kind of put it into terms for everyone to understand is that I was hoping for Anchorman, but got Anchorman 2.
Oh, yeah?
If that makes sense. So, of course, I got to kind of run down what this book is about. And
the title seems like it kind of gives it away.
It does give a lot of it away. It's about a man who's named Shirtless. He lives naked in the woods, and they kind of use this for some comedy. They blur out his dick, and it's a very big blur, so he's got a big penis. It's funny. And
hilarious.
Yeah, so he was raised by bears who he can apparently communicate with. They don't really specify if the bears talk, but that's kind of the gist I got, was they were talking bears. There's Papa Bear and Brother Bear, etc. Kind of like a Berenstain Bears type situation going on. It's left.
I'm right there with you. You didn't have to further explain yourself.
It's left a mystery why Shirtless one day decides to vow to keep the woods safe and fight all bears. You go from one page where he's being raised by them and he loves his bear family, and then the guy who's telling the story, who's a FBI agent, he's telling the story of Shirtless to another FBI agent, and he says no one knows why he decided to fight all bears. But I guess they're going to delve into that in future issues. So like I said, it's an FBI agent talking to another FBI agent about this story, and because they're there trying to get Shirtless's help because bears are invading cities. They show guns and other weaponry, like nukes and stuff, being used on the bears, but the bears can't be stopped. So I don't know if it's canon that just bears can't be killed, I guess, but they never explain that either. So this book is obviously just littered with really stupid visual gags. Another play, like I talked about how he had a big blur for his dick, they show him when he's a baby getting found by the bears, and baby Shirtless also still has a big dick and has a beard. So they're trying to play it up like, I guess, like kind of one of those Chuck Norris jokes is what it reminds me of. But another joke that really falls flat that I have to bring up. At the end of the book, he's flying Bear Force One, and it looks like a bear. It has a bear's head. So this is.
I'd be disappointed if it wasn't.
So it's very self-evident comedy, which I appreciate, but it's way over the top, and a lot of the jokes are forced and feel really dumb. It tries way too hard, and the artwork is really good, but it can't save just the cringeworthy comedy that is littered throughout the book. It comes across desperate to be funny, which is kind of why I equated it to Anchorman 2.
Yeah.
That movie just tried way too hard to outdo the first one, and it, like that movie, it just doesn't work. The comedy's not where it needs to be. So I would not recommend Shirtless Bear Fighter #1, or probably any of the issues that follow.
So yeah, we've lost a potential Twitter follower.
Yeah. But I got to keep it real, man.
Oh yeah, for sure. So unfortunately, neither one of us read a good book this week, because I am going to talk about War for the Planet of the Apes #1, which is a Boom Studios crossover. I like the publisher quite a lot. We've talked about it before. Some of the original content is really good. They do a lot of comic book crossovers for popular movies. They did Dawn of the Planet of the Apes recently, or I guess that was a couple of years ago when that movie came out. And I believe I talked about it on a past episode, and I was pretty positive, if I remember correctly, on that particular episode, because I think I talked about issue #1. I soured on that book quite a lot. As much as I like the film Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the comic left much to be desired. Nothing substantial really happens in that book. What drew me to War, which, not that I need much convincing to read a Planet of the Apes book, but it was kind of the writer, David F. Walker, who did a few things that I've liked in the past. He writes, well, he may not write it anymore, but at least he did write at one point Power Man and Iron Fist, which is a comic that I really, really liked when it first came out. I've soured on that book a little bit, but it's still a pretty decent book. He also wrote Tarzan on the Planet of the Apes, which is a book that I surprisingly liked quite a lot. I didn't expect too much because I don't really care about Tarzan at all. And I also appreciate that he is a writer that has worked with the franchise to at least a certain extent before. Unfortunately, War for the Planet of the Apes #1 was very similar to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes #1. Not a whole lot happens. I've talked extensively about what I feel like a #1 has to do to be successful. Unfortunately, there's none of that in this first issue. It's very exposition heavy. Not a ton of actual plot happens in this book. I think that it's difficult, and we've talked about this in the past, to tell an interesting story that happens in between two films. So, I mean, they definitely had a big chore, the creative team on this book. But if the Star Wars book, the Marvel comic book, has taught us anything, that, yeah, it's difficult, but it's not impossible, because I really enjoyed that book, and I wanted to really enjoy this book. Unfortunately, where Star Wars is telling kind of an interesting story that just happens to fall in between two movies, War for the Planet of the Apes, at least the first issue, which I'm not going to read any of the other issues, just seems kind of the lowest common denominator of storytelling. They really played it really safe in this book, and it was just super, super disappointing. I would say definitely skip it. If you want more War for the Planet of the Apes, just go see the movie again, because this is not what you want from a comic book crossover.
Gotcha, man. I will not check this out.
Did you even know it had come out?
No.
Okay.
But typically books that come out around a new release movie are like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like video games based on movies to me. They're rarely good or add any value to the film.
Yeah, it's disappointing, because I think they had a good idea. Like, I like the idea of having Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the movie, and then they had Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the comic book, and then that kind of was at least supposed to flow into what happens in the movie Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And then this comic book, War of the Planet of the Apes, it's confusing how they switched that up, but it's supposed to be similar. It's supposed to flow into the movie. That would have been really cool if they told interesting stories, but they failed to do that part. Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting, an interesting concept if you could watch the movie, read the comic book, watch the movie, read the comic book, watch the movie, and have this whole cohesive story. Unfortunately, the comic books are super boring.
Gotcha, man.
All right, so you ready for some nerd news?
Yeah, so every week we break down some of the nerd headlines that have come out since the last time we spoke. Got a few this week. So D23 is going on this weekend, which looks fucking tight. Like, I would love to go to D23. And there's a lot of information.
You're saying tight a lot in this episode, and it's making me uncomfortable.
That's how I talk now. I don't know.
All right.
I'm sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. But like I said, it's pretty tight, and I'd love to go someday. And there's a lot of stuff that's been coming out of it, but I'm not going to bore you with like the theme park stuff. Instead, I'll stick to something we talked about a few episodes ago, which was Incredibles.
Yep.
I guess they showed some footage from Incredibles 2, and it comes out next summer. The big takeaway I had from that, all of the information they put out there, was that it's picking up moments after the first one ends.
Yeah.
And again, you said that you've only seen it once, or you've never seen it. I can't remember.
I've seen it once. I have not watched it since we had our Pixar retrospective, which I kind of said I was going to, and I just never did.
So to me, I think that I had mentioned in a couple episodes, it's pretty disappointing. I think that it's been like, 14 or 15 years since that movie came out. And I think that there'd be awesome stories to tell about the kids getting older and how, family dynamics change. And instead, they're just going to continue with them being young, which I'm not crazy about, but I also trust Brad Bird. So, I mean, it's his baby, and Tomorrowland was not great. But
no, that was
Mission Impossible movie he did was good.
Yeah.
That was Protocol. And then, of course, he has the successful Disney movies he's done. So it's his baby. So I trust it for now, but I am a little bit disappointed with that.
Yeah, I don't really have a dog in the fight because I've only seen the movie once. And like we talked about with our Pixar retrospective, the part 1, when we discussed this movie, I was just kind of lukewarm on it. Don't really remember a whole lot from it. So again, I'm not that attached to the franchise, so I couldn't care less really. But I do know that you were really interested in it, and I saw that story, and I was like, Tyler's not going to be happy about that.
So going from Disney to Quentin Tarantino.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw, but it's been kind of revealed what his next movie is going to be, which could potentially, I guess, be his second to last movie if he holds true to that. I forget, he said 10 movies, right? Is what he was doing. So he's working on a dramatization of the Manson family murders. So the news that came out was that he was courting Margot Robbie to be in it, but it's also going to potentially star Brad Pitt, Jennifer Lawrence, and Samuel L. Jackson.
Of course.
They didn't say who would play Charles Manson. I guess Brad Pitt is the detective investigating the murders, and I don't know who Jennifer Lawrence would be playing, but Margot Robbie plays, what's that actress's name that got killed? The wife of Roman Polanski, I believe. Sharon Tate, maybe?
That sounds right. I mean, that sounds like a name that's familiar to me.
Yeah, I believe, here it is in this article. Margot Robbie's would be cast as Sharon Tate, who, spoiler alert, gets murdered by Charles Manson and his followers. So, I mean, that could be cool, right?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, Charles Manson, people are infatuated with him as just like this villainous character, which obviously he is. I think that Tarantino would be great writing a Manson movie just because there's so much more to him as a person. Like he's obviously this villainous character, but he never actually murdered anybody. He convinced other people to murder people for him. And so I think that Tarantino has made a career out of writing interesting characters. So if he's writing Charles Manson, I think that could definitely be a really interesting movie for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious if it will be an actual dramatization of what happened, or if it'll be like Inglourious Bastards, where things kind of take a turn that's not really historically accurate.
I would rather see him kind of have fun with it and not stick directly to what happened.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's been so many other documentaries and whatnot about those murders. And so if we were just going to have a movie about that, that's stuck directly, I mean, anybody could make that movie.
Exactly. So he has to definitely put his Tarantino spin on it. So going from one amazing filmmaker to another, Martin Scorsese is shaping up his next film, which is The Irishman, which he's been putting together for, it seems like, forever now.
Yeah.
It's going to be on Netflix, which is a little weird to me, but the cast is amazing. So Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel, and Ray Romano. Which
that last one seemed a little weird.
That one's a little weird, but he was in Vinyl, so I guess that's kind of his connection to Martin Scorsese. And I mean, after watching him in The Big Sick, like, I'm all in. I think he's kind of gotten past the Everybody Loves Raymond part of his career. So apparently, they will follow these. They will all play characters of themselves as like 30, 50, and 70. So they're going to do like the Marvel thing of de-aging these actors, which I don't know that I'm 100% bought into. But the most exciting part for me is that Joe Pesci is going to be in it, because he hasn't done anything since 2010.
Was that The Good Shepherd?
No, 2006. So from 2006 to 2010, he didn't do anything. Good Shepherd was 2006, and he's only in it for that one scene.
Yeah.
And then in 2010, he made a movie called Love Ranch, which I've never seen.
Nope.
And the movie before Good Shepherd was Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998. So
really?
This dude has not worked much in the last 20 years.
He was in everything in like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, and I remember watching, like, I guess that Guys Award thing on Spike TV. I don't watch that because that's fucking dumb. But I watched, I guess they got a Legacy Award, him and Robert De Niro, and I watched their acceptance speech, and he's just did not seem interested in doing anything ever again. And Robert De Niro made a jab about how they were trying to get him to do this movie, and he wasn't going to do it. But it sounds like he is now. So I'm most excited about that, because the dude's 74.
Yeah.
And his career's been non-existent. He's pretty much retired. So if anything, that's what I'm most excited for The Irishman.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That sounds awesome.
All right. And this last one is kind of a segue into our main topic, because it concerns Matt Reeves, who directed War for the Planet of the Apes. He has obviously been doing a lot of press for that movie, and of course he's going to be asked about Batman, because he's making the next Batman standalone movie, and he confirmed that he has pretty much started from scratch. I guess he's doing his own script, not using the one that Jeff Johns and Ben Affleck were working on whenever Ben Affleck was set to helm that movie. So I'm all in for that. I think that he's a great storyteller, and I would appreciate it more if he made his movie anyway, so I trust him.
Yeah, so I've mentioned this a couple of times. I love the director's commentary on Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. If you are interested in that movie at all, definitely check that out. It's really interesting to listen to him talk about it. And it sounds like he did something very similar with that movie. They already had a script for that movie. He just went in, pitched his idea, and was like, hey, I don't think you guys are going to like this, but here's just an idea that I have for this movie. And they loved it. And so he just started with scratch with that movie as well. So he's definitely seems like that guy. Like, he doesn't want to make somebody else's movie. He wants to make his movie. And so I really appreciate that, because obviously I love that movie.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was able to kind of go in and say, hey, this is my idea. If you guys don't want to do that, then that's fine. I'll pull out. But I really kind of appreciate that he was willing to take that chance. And obviously he made an amazing movie. So I trust that he can make an amazing Batman movie. It does kind of irritate me, though, that he's doing press for this movie, and that all they want, it seems like all they want to talk to him about is the Batman movie.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was kind of the same thing with Ben Affleck whenever he was trying to promote Live by Night.
Yeah.
He just couldn't get away from that. And so, I mean, that's how it is. Like, you know, if Mark Hamill were in something right now and he was doing press for it, they'd be asking him about Star Wars. So,
yeah, for sure.
Just whenever you're in these huge franchises, unfortunately, that's what's going to get this press clicks. So,
oh, yeah, for sure. So, like you said, we're going to move right along to our War for the Planet of the Apes review. Like we just talked about, it was directed by Matt Reeves. He also helped write it. And it is Several years after the events of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar and his apes are in an all-out war with an army of men led by a colonel hell-bent on preventing a mutation of the virus from spreading. So this is obviously a follow-up to my favorite movie of all time. So, obviously I was excited for this film. I think the only film that I was more excited to see was maybe The Dark Knight. Maybe Force Awakens, because obviously I was really excited about that movie as well. But I was just unbelievably excited for this movie going in. At the same time, I understood that it had a lot of work to do to follow up from my favorite movie of all time. It had a lot of work to do to follow up on that great movie, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. But spoiler alert, I think that they did a pretty good job doing so.
Cool. So, you ready to get into broad strokes?
Yeah, I'm nervous now. The smile is making me nervous.
No, there's no reason to be nervous. I just don't think that I loved this movie as much as you did. I think that it's a good movie, not a great movie. And maybe I had expectations that were too high with all of the positive buzz around it. And, it has a great Rotten Tomatoes score right now. And I mean, I'm going to give it a positive review as well, but I feel like I was underwhelmed for 2/3 of the movie. I've always kind of struggled with this rebooted series because almost no matter what, I feel like I'm rooting for the humans. I'm a human and I don't want humans to go away. I don't want humans to be taken over by apes. So, I know that that's not a common thing. Obviously, you're into it. I've never seen any of the old Planet of the Apes movies. I don't have a dog in the fight. But
you only use that expression because I used it.
Oh, did you?
You stole my expression.
My bad. But anyways, it's even though Woody Harrelson plays a terrible person in this movie, I still want the humans to survive because I'm a human.
I don't think you get the point of these movies.
I don't think I do. So I just have a hard time wrapping my mind around rooting for the apes in this situation because it deals with the extinction of our species, and that's my problem.
But they're the better characters.
No, and we'll get into it with story. I think that they do an amazing job in the first act, and I'll talk about that more in a second. But I don't know. I feel like I like Dawn a lot better, and this movie is more on par with Rise, which is still a good movie, and I still enjoyed this movie, but it fucking dragged for me at some parts. It's very long, and I felt like there was a lot of exposition that wasn't needed.
I agree with a very tiny part of that. I mean, let's get it out of the way. I didn't obviously like this movie as much as I liked Dawn, which I didn't expect to. Dawn is still my favorite of all time. War is a fantastic movie. I'm going to call them Dawn and War so we don't have to do the whole title every single time. War is a fantastic film, but it's not even my favorite film of this year. I think it would probably be, right now, it'd probably be 3 or 4, even at this point of the year.
Which is still great.
Oh, yeah, it's still a fantastic film. I think that the rebooted trilogy, rebooted trilogy has been grim from the start, but War is just really depressingly dark. It's almost unrelentingly grim.
Yeah.
And I hate to do the thing that I just knocked other people for doing, but talking about the Batman when I should be talking about War for the Planet of the Apes. But I think Matt Reeves is going to fit right into the DC extended universe if this is the kind of movies that he wants to make. Because, like I said, it's just depressingly grim. The effects obviously blow you away. I think it's funny that we have gotten to the point that that's almost to be expected because Rise was so great. And then, of course, Dawn jumped that mocap effects ahead so far. And then this is still really just amazing. There's scenes where I'm just like, I was watching the movie and I was like, that can't be mocap. That has to be like a real orangutan. Like there's just no way that they created that 100%. With CGI. It was just so amazing. That being said, they're still not quite there with the mouths. When they have to talk, it's super distracting because it looks like an actual ape. And then when they start talking, the mouths moving looks a lot like CGI. And so that's a little bit distracting, but that's a minor nitpick. I will say that I am super, super happy, and this has more to do with, obviously, the trilogy as a whole than just this movie. I'm super, super happy that they were able to pull off this trilogy. I think that we have to give Fox a hand because they kind of pulled off a rare feat, not just a trilogy that works from start to finish, but also a rebooted trilogy that starts from start to finish. I mean, not only that, but it's kind of each film is kind of its own unique experience too. And they didn't just kind of ride the coattails of Rise. Like Dawn is a completely different movie from that, and I definitely appreciate the arc of these characters throughout the 3 films. Obviously I like this movie quite a lot more than you did, but I do agree with some of the stuff, and we'll just go ahead and jump right into the story so we could talk about those things.
So I didn't touch on a couple of things we'll touch on later in my broad strokes, but so there were a lot of things in different segments that I really loved about this movie, but the story is where it kind of lost me a bit. So I think that this movie starts incredibly strong. The opening of this movie was amazing. I was immediately bought in, and the things that happened to motivate Caesar the rest of the movie really pulled at my heartstrings. And like I said, I was bought into his journey. I was bought into the rest of the movie. But then the second act happens, and it kind of loses me a little bit. I think that their journey to where they're going kind of drags. And then once they get there, it drags even more. So by the time we get to the third act, I was kind of less bought in. I thought it was kind of anticlimactic, and I had lost a bit of interest. So they took an amazing opening, and I don't feel like they built on it enough throughout the rest of the film.
Okay, so I agree to a certain extent.
Okay.
I think everything about this film is outstanding, except for the story. I'm a little lukewarm on the story. It's not to say that it's a bad story, because I don't think it is. I just think that...
No, by no means is it bad.
I think Dawn is such a tight story, and has a clear vision. Matt Reeves, obviously going back to what I said with director's commentary on Dawn from the Planet of the Apes, he had such a clear vision for what he wanted to do with that movie, and I don't think that he necessarily had... I mean, obviously he had a vision for the movie, but I just don't think that he necessarily had that tight story, that clear vision that he had for Dawn. That being said, I do really... Like I mentioned a little bit in the broad strokes, I really appreciate Caesar's arc in the 3 films. I especially like the fact that in this particular film, he's completely broken down. And so I think that we definitely get to see a different aspect of his personality. I think it's funny that even after everything that happens in the beginning of the film, that he still doesn't lose his humanity, which I think just speaks to his strength as a character. And I think it's ironic that Woody Harrelson's character is the human character, but yet he has lost almost his entire humanity, which kind of baffles me that you'd still root for the human characters, even though the humans are the villains in these films, and Caesar is the stronger of he's more of a human character than the Colonel is in this movie.
So answer this for me, because I mentioned, embarrassingly, I have not seen the original Planet of the Apes movies.
Okay.
In those movies, the apes are villains, correct?
Some of the apes are villains.
Okay, so that's in my mindset watching this movie is I'm watching,
but
it's different.
So the first one, the apes definitely are the villains.
Yes,
they aren't in the second one. So I would say, and then the third one, the humans are the villains.
Okay,
really for the rest of the franchise. So really, it's just the first one
So the one that matters, that everybody loves.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I thought Conquest was really, really good. Other than Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which is the last of the original franchise, which is just garbage. Don't watch that movie. Not that you were ever going to plan on watching any of these movies.
I do. This is something that I need to do. I have the same amazing box set you have that I'm looking at right now in this nerd room you got. I need to just sit down and watch them. It's just something I haven't done yet.
Yeah. So. In the first one, they definitely are the villains, but even then, there are apes that help Charlton Heston's character in that movie and help Nova. So, yeah, it's hard to say that they're even villains in that movie.
Okay. But, so Cornelius is in that movie, correct?
Yes.
Which is Caesar's son in this movie.
Yes.
And I don't know, so this movie doesn't necessarily play into those movies at all.
Just forget of that.
Okay, but is Cornelius in that first movie good or bad?
He is good. He is one of the apes that it's Cornelius and Zera that help Charlton Heston's character and Nova escape and get away. And spoiler alert, I guess.
No, I mean that movie's so timeless that.
And then they have a son who is Caesar.
What the fuck?
They don't. You have to get out of your brain that this is not. This is just a reboot. It doesn't flow into the other movies.
Okay. I mean, still though, I don't want to see. I find it hard, even if human, because I feel like Woody Harrelson is just one human. Like the world's big. I feel like there's still good humans out there.
Yeah, there's still Jason Clarke's character from Dawn.
What the fuck happened to him?
He just went away. Remember that conversation at the end of the movie? No. They're deuces. They're out.
I just have a hard because there are things that happen in this movie that we obviously don't want to spoil that hint at humanity's continued downfall.
Yes.
And I can't get behind that for some reason.
See, I agree with you. I don't think that was really fleshed out very well, but I do appreciate that that's kind of an Easter egg, a callback to the original franchise because the humans can't talk in that. And I thought that was kind of a cool way, even though, again, I completely agree with what you said. It doesn't really get fleshed out that well.
I had no idea that was an Easter egg for the original film. So last night I read the Wikipedia for the first Planet of the Apes movie and read that in that movie humans are mute creatures that are kind of barbaric.
Yeah. There's quite a few Easter eggs, which I appreciate, obviously. I feel like that they threw that in there just to kind of show that they appreciate the original. And honestly, they've done that in most of the films. Yeah. Dawn didn't really have as many Easter eggs as I would have liked, but Rise did have quite a few. So I appreciated that. There's the Alpha Omega stuff.
Yep.
And Beneath the Planet of the Apes has a lot of that. The humans that are actually they're not even really humans. They're kind of mutants at that point. They are the villains in that movie for sure. So that's a callback to that one. The humans not being able to talk. Nova, the little girl in this movie, is obviously a callback to Linda Harrison, who plays Nova in the original. Again, not connected. She's not going to grow up to be that person. As far as I know, that would be fucking weird. If they decided to finally make that the connection, would be weird. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Oh, I mean, of course, Cornelius and the names, obviously.
Okay, I was just a little confused, I guess, throughout this entire trilogy. So
yeah, you could have just asked me.
No, well, I figure, I hope, we're kind of scattered with this review at this point, but I hope that they eventually make a fourth one that involves the astronauts coming back to Earth that we saw take off and Rise.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that I would like that, to be honest with you. I appreciate that being kind of a wink at the original, but I like the fact that this is a pure reboot. They do have those Easter eggs, but I don't want them to kind of bring it back to the original franchise.
Yeah, I mean, this ends the trilogy.
Yes.
As far as I know, they're not doing more of these, but if this movie makes bank over the weekend, I could see 20th Century Fox, being the studio that they are, saying, all right, let's do more. So we'll see.
I think they definitely open the door for that, or they leave the door open for more movies. But this is, without touching on any spoilers, this is definitely the end of Caesar's story. So trying to get back to what we were we didn't really go off the rails because we were still talking about the movie for a little bit there, but again, I think this movie, as far as the story is concerned, is unrelentingly grim, except for a particular character. Steve Zahn's character was really, really funny, and I thought that was a breath of fresh air at times in this movie, but at the same time, it was also felt forced at certain spots. Like, it didn't feel like it quite fit in certain spots because you would get a really serious spot and then they would cut to him and he'd be goofy. And I'm just like, that doesn't really fit with what's happening in the rest of the movie. But there was also times, like especially when they're digging the hole and he's being silly, I thought that was kind of fun because it kind of broke up just how unbelievably dark this movie is for most of the time. So I did appreciate his character quite a lot. I thought he was really well written, but I think that they could have done a better job of kind of fitting in the jokes.
Yeah, I thought that his character was fun, but I definitely agree with you that there were certain points where it was a little bit too much for what was going on.
Yeah, for sure. And without spoiling too much, I really loved the ending. It wasn't quite as shocking, obviously, as the original. That original movie kind of goes down in cinema history as being one of a Shyamalan type of twist at the end. But I was really satisfied with it. The fact that you expect big characters to make it out of movies, and I liked the fact that it was a happy ending, but it was also at the same time a not so happy ending.
I don't know. I know we can't spoil anything for sure that happens at the end of this movie, but I was not caught off guard by it because of it kind of being like, this is the last one of the trilogy type situation.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Maybe tying it to the original movie was a mistake on my part, but it definitely wasn't necessarily shocking, but I liked the fact that they kind of went away from what you would expect from a big blockbuster movie, a big franchise.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
All right, so unless you have anything more for the story, I'm going to move on to the performances. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I think Andy Serkis is definitely underrated because of his work with the mocap. I don't think people give it the credit that he deserves.
100%.
He definitely deserves an Oscar for something.
Yes.
I thought he was fantastic in this movie, so hopefully it's this movie. I thought that Woody Harrelson was great as the menacing bad guy. I think that there's certain parts of this movie where his character was a little bit uneven and they want you to sympathize with him a little bit more, and maybe it's just the writing, but I don't think that he played that aspect of the character as well as he played the bad guy. I thought he was just fantastic as the bad guy, and there's some conversations between him and Caesar that I think that they wanted you to sympathize with him a little bit more, and I just didn't think that part hit, and maybe that's more with the material. Like we said, that aspect of the story wasn't as well fleshed out. So I don't think that he played those parts as well as he did as the menacing bad guy. And they also kind of did that with Gary Oldman's character in Dawn. They made him the bad guy, but then they still want you to sympathize with him. And I think that that's the part of the movie that's, as much as I love that movie, I think that's the part of the movie that they struggled with the most. And it's kind of upsetting that they kind of went back to that well, even though it didn't really work in Dawn. So I think that he did a good job as far as the performance is concerned. I think that maybe the material, especially with that character, was a little bit lacking. I do love that they brought Cuba back, even though he's not really in this movie a ton. I thought that was pretty cool. I think Toby Cabell isn't the best actor. I've seen him in, maybe he's just not great at picking some of his roles because he's in some really shitty movies. But I think that he plays that character so well. And I was as bummed as I was that Andy Serkis didn't get a nod for anything in any of these award seasons for Dawn a couple of years ago. I was definitely upset that Toby Cabell didn't get anything for his role as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that this mocap stuff is like extremely underrated, and unfortunately so. Andy Serkis is just amazing and he did amazing work not only in this movie but in this entire trilogy. So him not being rewarded for his efforts is not great. So Woody Harrelson was fine as well. I mean, he's kind of Woody Harrelson in most movies. He was a menacing bad guy. Steve Zahn did a good job as Bat-Ape. He brought the humor, and for somebody who I don't think that's ever done mocap before, I thought that he did a fine job. But I'm definitely on the same page with you on most of this. There wasn't really a bad performance in the movie. Yeah,
for sure. So moving on to action, for me, for a film that has war in the title, there wasn't a ton of it in there, but I did like I mean, obviously you don't always have to have a ton of big battle or action sequences to be a war movie. There's obviously a lot of psychological aspects of war, and I think that they did a really good job, especially with Andy Serkis's performance, kind of conveying that. I will say that I don't think that some of these battles were as cool, or maybe if the franchise does continue, I don't think they're ever going to top how cool that Dawn sequence is, where they're on horseback and they're evading the settlement. I thought that was just a phenomenal scene. So I don't necessarily think that they topped that or really came close in this movie, but I will say that the first sequence, they kind of had that World War I trench warfare kind of thing going for it in that opening sequence. And I thought that was really fantastic. And I did like the end sequence, the war sequence. I thought that was pretty cool, even though I think they could have played it up a little bit more. Like, I think they kind of rushed it a little bit, especially for a movie that's like 2.5 hours. I felt like they rushed through that last sequence a little bit more than they should have, but they had to get to the ending, like I said. But yeah, I could have used a little bit more action, but the action that we did, I thought was pretty good.
I'm right there with you. I thought the action in this movie was great, but again, it's a movie called War for the Planet of the Apes, and there is like no war in it. So, I mean, look at this fucking poster, man. Yeah, I saw that poster going into the movie, and I was like, oh shit, here we go. And there's nothing like that. Like, you have that war scene in the first, the first 10, 15 minutes of the movie, which is amazing. My favorite part of the movie. And then you don't really get that again.
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed because they kind of teased that this was going to be like a back and forth. Like, they've been going at it for this for a while. I'd like to see some of that.
Yeah. And I that's what I was hoping to see as well. And then, of course, you do have this stuff that you talked about in the third act that was kind of a battle a bit. But I felt like, again, kind of what you were saying, they wrapped that up and they're like, all right, so now we got to take care of things. How can we take care of things and move this to the end of the movie? And I won't spoil what happens, but I thought that what ends up happening is a cop-out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, I thought that as I was watching it. I was like, oh, come on, you can do better than that.
Yep, and I thought that was kind of sloppy writing. So I love the action that was in there, but I don't like how some of it fleshed out. Maybe that belonged in the story part of it, but I was disappointed with the lack of action.
For sure. All right, so star rating out of 5 stars, would you give War for the Planet of the Apes?
I thought that it was still a good movie, despite the negative things I had to say. I am giving it 3.5.
Okay, that makes sense, because obviously I liked it a little bit more than you did, so I'm going to give it 4. I kind of went back between 4 and 4.5, but I don't know. There's definitely a few things that left me wanting more, for sure. So 4 seems like a good spot for it. All right, so nerd favorite, what's that this week?
All right, so we haven't done favorite Woody Harrelson performance yet, and I'm not doing favorite Woody Harrelson movie purposefully because I picked this in my mind before we did that review, and I was scared you would just say, okay, War for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's still your answer or not, but I'm going to do...
Yeah, I think it probably would be.
So instead, I'm going to do performance, which it might be this movie as well, but before you answer, I'll go ahead and throw mine out there. Woody Harrelson is a guy who has worked a ton, but I kind of decided on this being nerd favorite earlier this week and went through his filmography, and honestly, he's kind of the same dude a lot. In his movies. So it was kind of hard for me. Out of the Furnace wasn't a very good movie, but I thought that he was a great villain in it. that being said, I think that I'm going to go with, if it's not that, it's Zombieland. Just because that movie is so funny and so great. And I love whenever Woody Harrelson's allowed to do comedy, because obviously that's what he kind of started with Cheers.
Yeah.
And watching him being able to kind of flex that comedic bone is cool for me, because I think he's good at it and he's better at that than being dramatic. So the fact that he got to do that quite a bit in Zombieland was really fun to watch. So I'm going to go with his performance in that movie.
Yeah, I would agree with you as far as his filmography is concerned, except for the fact that I'm going to pick a drama that he's in. Yeah. Have you ever seen The Messenger?
No.
With Ben Foster.
I know what movie you're talking about, though.
Yeah, I thought that he played the recovering, like, super strict army guy really, really well. I mean, Ben Foster is a star of that movie. It's one of the reasons why I kind of had a bit of a man crush on him for a little bit, because of that movie. The movie, super, super depressing. Fantastic movie. One of those movies, much like 12 Years a Slave and Manchester by the Sea, like one of those movies I think you should see, but I'm never going to watch again. Like, it feels weird saying that I liked that film because it's so depressing, and it's a movie that I definitely would never watch again, but he is really, really good. One of the few dramatic movies or performances that he does really, really well, because I definitely agree with you. He works a lot, but he's not always the best in some of the stuff that he does. So that was one of the rare dramatic roles that I thought he nailed.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know that I'll ever watch that because it sounds way too depressing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely one of those movies that kind of hits you over the head with it, for sure.
So, but that's cool that he's really good in it.
For sure. All right. So as always, you can subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. Check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Also comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our Twitch channel, which Tyler does a weekly stream Monday at 9 p.m. Central, which is currently on hiatus until his job situation kind of gets settled. I also do a weekly stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. Email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. We are still currently looking for more listener questions, so definitely email us those. And vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt,
we are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.